Okay, so this is a demo of the current version 3.3 of the sort of demo that we're doing for the risk mandate. So we have a bunch of different scenarios, but let me just walk you through here. So you pick sort of the state, and we're going to be adding multiple examples, but this is an agent runs in production and can change something, right? So what we now have is a series of questions. And here on the right, you're going to see the view for the operator, the CISO, the board, and what the risk register looks like and everything else, right? So let's say you have an agent, right? So as soon as you have an agent, what happens is we have a risk. We run agents that can change in production. And the way that it works is that you have the risk here, who then connects to, basically, so we then change this risk. You can see it changes from the point of view of um, the target audience, right? So it looks different from each of those. So you can actually see that for each of these, we actually now have a risk register that is dedicated to each one, but also we have the chain, right? So we can see that the operator connects to an agent that can reach production, gives this risk, right? So now the same fact eventually leads to this different risk, which is for the exec, and there's a different risk for the board. So where you can see now here is you can see all the risks connected. This fact leads to the operator risk, which is this. We run a change in production, leads to the exec, a change capable automation is live in a state and is registered to no one. And then to the board is we operate an autonomous system inside the business, and somebody has to own that decision, right? So that's that risk that we have today, right? Again, that needs to be tweaked. I would probably say that it's not about somebody, but you probably want to say that there's no owner because we haven't mapped it, or maybe we operate even just the first part is important, right? But what's cool about this is you can even, for each of these, you can now go into and you can now see the statement. You can see who owns it, so you can see the different exposure at different levels, which is quite cool. You can see why is here, so this now connects to the provisions that is touched. So this is the EU Act provisions that is actually implemented, and here you can actually see the whole flow for these risks, right? Including more information, etc. So we can now continue. We can say, look, two more questions. Let's say, is there a named person? Like, so the question here is, do you know somebody who's actually responsible for stopping this? So maybe let's say there's a team, right? So now what this does is this now has created another risk, right? And basically the risk here is a named person, a team. So now we say stop ownership, since loosely within a team, and you see the operator, that's the fact. And then you have different risks that we start to connect here, right? And then we can go, if you have to stop right now, could you? If we say eventually, that's another risk, right? Because stop is possible, but not a single action, right? And then we can continue. We can say, how long will you stop? Maybe under an hour, right? So now we have to start mapping, under an hour. In fact, I would actually add a bunch of risks here, because that means we still have the risk of damage of what can be done within an hour, right? And let's say you know that you don't know the side effects of mapping it, so now that's another risk, right? So we basically we will now then to start adding the risks for that, right? To know what is exactly happening, right? And again, you can continue. Again, remember, for each of these, you can go in here and you can then see the statement that we have, who actually owns it at the different levels. So again, you can see that this all interacts, and then why this is here, because of the EU Act 14, and then you can see the whole flow here, right? And eventually we have our risk register, which is flowing here, which again, you can see that the risk register is unique per stakeholder, right? Which is very powerful. A couple more questions. If behavior full speed, what could you reach? Let's say hits customers. Could the worst change be done partially? Is there a written procedure? Maybe you written, but you never tested. And then eventually you have all these key questions, and then now you have a register, right? And the register now is created from all these risks. And again, every one of these risks comes because we have the facts, right? And we have the information, and we have the evidence, and we have the flow for each of these, right? And that's fundamentally this operator, right? And it's quite cool to see the different views from each of those guys. And again, here, again, I'm going to graph a better version of this, but it starts to show the full flows, right? Like this evidence, this fact needs to this, needs to that. Then we have three risks connected to each one. This will actually be different numbers, right? Because they should be different risks, and eventually we'll show this in a different graph. But it's getting there, right? It's starting to be pretty cool. And then here we can actually pick a particular one. So let's say you have a rough day, so you can actually see the risks connected to it. You can see a well-run estate. You can see, there you go, right? So that's the only risk here, is that we run an agent that can change the production, because when you look at the facts that you have a name pressure, one action, stop in minutes, mapped, so you can actually start to see that you got all this information, and none of these creates a risk, right? Although some of these I would actually probably say that it's interesting to see the damage on some of these parts, right? But yeah, but there you go. So that's a good, well-run estate.